Look, I'm just saying that if you want to resolve this without blowing up half the Orion arm, maybe don't call the Crack's ambassador's mother a gelatinous waste of evolutionary potential, said Lieutenant Commander Olivia Thompson, massaging her temples as she followed Ambassador Dante Reed down the gleaming corridor of the Galactic Conclave station. I didn't call her that, Dante replied with the patient tone of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a particularly dense child. I merely suggested that if the ambassador's lineage contained any more self-replicating proteins, they'd be classified as a viral outbreak rather than a species. That's literally worse, Olivia muttered, quickening her pace to match Dante's long strides. It's called diplomacy, Lieutenant Commander. You might want to look it up sometime. Dante adjusted his ceremonial sash, standard diplomatic attire that he insisted on wearing at a rakish angle that would give the protocol office collective aneurysms. I have 3 advanced degrees in xenopolitical relations, and nowhere in the curriculum did it suggest insulting a warlord's progenitor as a viable negotiation strategy. That's because they don't teach the good stuff at the academy. The pair entered the conclave's central chamber, a vast dome designed to accommodate representatives of over 2,000 sentient species. The architecture was a headache-inducing compromise of varying atmospheric requirements, gravitational preferences, and aesthetic traditions. The result looked like someone had given a 5-year-old child architectural software and a fever dream for inspiration. The Crack's delegation had already arrived, their massive forms dominating the human-sized seating arrangements like adults crammed into kindergarten furniture. The Cracks were essentially walking battle tanks, evolved on a high-gravity death world where everything, including the plant life, had developed sophisticated ways to kill everything else. Their exoskeletons gleamed under the chamber's lights, polished to a mirror shine that reflected fractals of color from their iridescent eyes. At the center stood Warlord Xerkthan, all 9 feet of armored nightmare, mandibles clicking in what humans had learned was an expression of extreme irritation. His ceremonial battle armor was adorned with the remnants of various defeated enemies, a walking museum of conquest that made subtle clicking sounds as pieces gently knocked against each other with each movement. Ah, Ambassador Reed. The Warlord's translator device rendered his series of clicks and hisses into a synthetic approximation of human speech. I was just telling my advisors how much I look forward to consuming your internal organs while you watch. Warlord Xerkthan, looking positively murderous today. Did you do something different with your mandibles? They're absolutely gleaming with menace. Dante beamed at the alien as if receiving a compliment rather than a death threat. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. 3 more years until retirement. Just 3 more years. Your disrespect knows no bounds, human. Xerkthan clicked, the translation unit struggling to convey the depth of his rage. The treaty negotiations are concluded. We will settle this as warriors. A hush fell over the chamber. Various species began shuffling uncomfortably in their seats, appendages or containment fields, depending on their physiological requirements. Oh? Dante raised an eyebrow, looking positively delighted by this turn of events. And what did you have in mind? Ritual combat? A battle of wits? A cooking competition? I make a mean souffle, though I should warn you that Earth cuisine might dissolve your exoskeleton. The warlord's iridescent eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. I challenge you to Vkr'lak. The alien delegates gasped collectively. Several smaller species promptly fainted. A Valerian diplomat's bioluminescent patterns flashed in what appeared to be emergency code, and its aides quickly hustled it from the chamber. Right, Dante nodded sagely. Vkr'lak, classic choice. Timeless, really. One minor question. What exactly is Vkr'lak? It is our most sacred ritual combat, the warlord's translator intoned gravely. A test of strength, endurance, and tactical thinking that has remained unchanged for 12,000 solar cycles. No non-Cracks has ever survived the challenge. Sounds delightful. Dante smiled. I accept. Now it was Olivia's turn to gasp. Ambassador, a word, please. She grabbed Dante's arm and pulled him to the side with surprising strength for someone a foot shorter than him. Have you completely lost your mind? She hissed. The Cracks evolved on a planet with 3 times Earth's gravity. Their exoskeletons can withstand direct hits from military-grade projectile weapons, and I once saw one of their younglings casually playing with what looked suspiciously like weapons-grade plutonium. Dante patted her shoulder reassuringly. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, have a little faith. Besides, I've been looking for an excuse to get out of that charity gala next week. The canapes are always terrible. Before Olivia could formulate a response that wouldn't violate at least 6 regulations about respecting superior officers, Dante had already turned back to the warlord. When and where does this charming tradition take place? The combat arena, 1 planetary rotation from now, Xerxthin replied, seeming slightly taken aback by the human's eagerness. There will be witnesses from all conclave species. Perfect. I'll bring snacks. Any allergies I should be aware of? The warlord's mandibles clicked in confusion. You understand that this is a fight to the death? Well, that seems a bit dramatic for what is essentially a diplomatic disagreement about mining rights in a system nobody even lives in. But sure, I'll pencil in possible death on my schedule. Dante made a note on his archaic paper planner, his one concession to the technology ban during formal conclave sessions. Ambassador Reed. The warlord leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human. Perhaps your species' reputation for irrational courage has led you to misunderstand. HFY is not merely combat. It is a sacred trial designed specifically for Crack's physiology and psychology. Your acceptance suggests either profound disrespect or suicidal tendencies. Or exceptional confidence, Dante replied with a wink. See you tomorrow, warlord. I recommend getting a good night's sleep. You look a little stressed around the mandibles. As they exited the chamber, Olivia finally found her voice again. I need to contact Earth Command immediately. We need to extract you before I participate in the first human Cracks ritual combat in galactic history, and miss my chance to make first-hand observations of their most sacred cultural practice. Not a chance. Dante's eyes gleamed with the specific brand of madness that Olivia had come to recognize as uniquely human. A combination of curiosity, stubbornness, and the complete inability to acknowledge obvious danger. You're going to die, she stated flatly. Possibly, he agreed cheerfully. But more likely, I'm going to win, and then the Cracks will be so confused they'll agree to our terms just to make sense of the universe again. That's not how diplomacy works. Traditional diplomacy, no. Human diplomacy? He grinned. Absolutely. Word of the challenge spread through the conclave station faster than a quantum entanglement relay. By evening, the station's common areas were buzzing with speculation, wagers, and increasingly elaborate tales of previous HFY challenges. I heard the last non-Cracks who attempted it was a Dralaxian war master. A 4-armed Palaxian merchant whispered to a captivated audience in the station's largest dining facility. 7 feet tall, carapace like neutronium 6 hearts, lasted 12 seconds before the warlord separated his head from all 4 of his thoraxes. That's nothing, countered a floating gas bag Ulurian, its translation module emitting puffs of scented vapor with each word. My grand progenitor witnessed a challenge on Outpost Sigma 9. The challenger was dissolved so completely they had to identify the species from residual DNA in the arena drains. At a corner table, Olivia sat with her head in her hands while Dante cheerfully worked his way through a plate of what the station's automated kitchen had optimistically labeled spaghetti carbonara, but which more closely resembled beige shoelaces suspended in petroleum jelly. You should eat something, he suggested, twirling the pasta-adjacent substance around his fork. Need to keep your strength up for watching me make history tomorrow. I've submitted my formal protest to both Earth Command and the Conclave Ethics Committee, she replied without looking up. For all the good it will do. The committee said that since you accepted the challenge voluntarily, they have no grounds to intervene. And Earth Command? They said, and I quote, Ambassador Reed's unique approach to interspecies relations has yielded unexpected positive outcomes in the past. We see no reason to override his judgment in this matter. See? Even the bureaucrats back home have faith in me. No, they just know that if you somehow pull this off, they can claim it was their strategy all along. And if you die horribly, they'll issue a statement about your regrettable but noble sacrifice before your remains have even been scraped off the arena floor. Dante pointed his fork at her. That's why I like you, Thompson. Always seeing the best in people. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a small delegation of various species, led by a Tavari information specialist, a species renowned for their ability to collect, analyze, and distribute data across the galaxy. Ambassador Reed, the Tavari's crystalline voice chimed through its translator. We have compiled all available information on HFY that non-crack sources have been able to document. That's remarkably helpful, Dante said, genuinely surprised. Thank you. Do not thank us. The Tavari's faceted eyes rotated in what might have been embarrassment. We are merely ensuring our betting pool has accurate information. The current odds against your survival are 14,926 to 1. Only that high? Dante looked offended. I would have expected at least 20,000 to 1. The odds were adjusted after taking into account the human tendency toward improbable survival scenarios. The Tavari explained. Your species has developed quite a reputation. Well, don't let me disappoint the bookmakers. Dante accepted the data crystal the Tavari offered. I assume you've placed your own wager? The Tavari's crystalline form briefly shimmered with color patterns. I have placed a small bet on your survival. Not because I believe it likely, but because the potential return on investment is significant. After the delegation departed, Olivia eyed the data crystal. Please tell me you're going to study that thoroughly. Of course. Dante inserted the crystal into his personal tablet. I'm reckless, not stupid. They spent the next several hours reviewing what little information was available about the Cracks ritual. As it turned out, little was an optimistic assessment. The data consisted primarily of external observations, second-hand accounts, and a disturbing collection of post-combat medical assessments of failed challengers. So, to summarize, Olivia said as they reached the end of the data, Vkr'lak takes place in a specialized arena filled with environmental hazards. It consists of 5 stages, each designed to test different aspects of Cracks' capabilities. No one knows exactly what these stages entail because non-Cracks observers are only permitted to view the challenge through filtered sensory feeds. And because most challengers don't survive past the first stage, Dante added unhelpfully. Right. The only concrete information we have is that the arena's gravity can be adjusted up to 5 times Earth normal. The temperature can range from near absolute zero to literally molten rock, and there are apparently ancestral predators involved. Ancestral predators, Dante repeated thoughtfully, as in the things that used to eat Cracks before they evolved intelligence and technology. Exactly. The creatures that were so terrifying they forced the evolution of sentient battle tanks. Dante leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. You know what this means, right? That you're going to die in spectacular fashion? No. It means the Cracks designed this challenge specifically for themselves. It's meant to test Cracks against the most extreme conditions their physiology can withstand. Yes, and your physiology is significantly more fragile than theirs in every measurable way. Dante's smile widened. But that also means it's designed with specific assumptions in mind. Assumptions based on Cracks' psychology, Cracks' problem-solving, Cracks' limitations. Olivia stared at him for a long moment before understanding dawned. You're not planning to beat the challenge on Cracks' terms. When have humans ever beaten anyone on their terms? Dante stood, stretching. We didn't conquer Earth's deadliest environments by becoming stronger than avalanches or hotter than volcanoes. We used tools, technology, cooperation. Olivia's expression shifted from despair to cautious hope. And the one advantage I'm betting the Cracks never considered. Dante tapped his temple. Lateral thinking. Now, I need you to get me something from our ship. What? Everything. The combat arena was a massive circular structure built into one of the station's lower levels. Originally designed as an emergency environmental testing facility, the Vkr'lak had modified it extensively to suit their ritual needs. The viewing gallery circled the upper level, separated from the arena by reinforced transparent barriers designed to withstand anything from vacuum to plasma explosions. The gallery was packed with representatives from every conclave species, creating a kaleidoscope of forms, colors, and atmospheric requirements. Special containment fields separated incompatible biologies, while still allowing all to witness the spectacle. Olivia paced nervously near the human section of the gallery. Earth's diplomatic corps had turned out in full force, their expressions ranging from solemn resignation to morbid curiosity. A few junior attachés were even taking selfies with the arena in the background. Lieutenant Commander Thompson. She turned to find Admiral Fitzgerald, Earth's senior military representative to the conclave, standing behind her. His weathered face was carefully neutral, but she could see the concern in his eyes. Admiral, she saluted reflexively. At ease. Any word from our enthusiastic ambassador? He's in the preparation chamber. The Cracks allowed him 1 hour to prepare, though they seemed confused by the concept that a human might need preparation. The Admiral nodded. The Secretary-General sends her, well, not approval exactly, but acknowledgement of Ambassador Reed's unorthodox approach. You mean his suicide mission? I've known Dante Reed for 30 years, Thompson. He's made a career out of being underestimated. The Admiral's gaze drifted to the arena below, though I admit, this might be pushing even his legendary luck. A hush fell over the gallery as the massive doors on opposite sides of the arena slid open. From one emerged warlord Kazurkthan, his battle armor replaced with the traditional Kerchektvek's attire, which appeared to be no attire at all, his natural exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. The cracks in the gallery clicked their mandibles in approval, the sound like thousands of castanets being played simultaneously. From the other door emerged Ambassador Dante Reed. "What in the seven hells is he wearing?" Admiral Fitzgerald muttered. Olivia couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. "Everything, sir." Dante had entered the arena in what appeared to be a patchwork monstrosity of equipment. The foundation was clearly an environmental suit designed for extreme conditions, but it had been modified with elements from at least a dozen different technologies. Reinforced exoframe components covered his limbs, jury-rigged to interface with the suit's systems. A backpack-like apparatus hummed with power, connected to various smaller devices attached at strategic points. His helmet was a custom creation, combining the best elements of deep space exploration visors with combat tactical displays. In his right hand, he carried what looked like a standard-issue emergency tool, essentially a high-tech Swiss Army knife on steroids. The gallery erupted in a cacophony of reactions. The cracks section vibrated with clicks that the translation system rendered as outrage, amusement, and confusion in equal measure. Other species were torn between shock at the apparent disrespect and admiration for the humans' creative approach to certain death. Warlord Xerkthan's mandibles spread wide in what humans had learned was the cracks' equivalent of incredulous laughter. "What is this? You come to Sacred Combat dressed as a walking technology shop?" Dante's voice came through the arena's communication system, slightly distorted by his helmet. "The challenge rules state that the combatant may bring themselves and whatever they can carry unaided into the arena. I'm carrying all of this, unaided." "This is," the warlord began. "Completely within the rules," Dante interrupted. "I checked 3 times, with your own legal experts." The warlord turned to look up at the Cracks delegation, several of whom made confirming clicks after hurriedly consulting their data terminals. "Very well," Xerkthan's translator rendered his clicks with a distinctly irritated tone. "It will make no difference. The challenge was designed to test a warrior's natural abilities." "Fascinating cultural perspective," Dante replied cheerfully. "Where I come from, a warrior's natural abilities include using their brain to create advantages." The Conclave's senior arbiter, an ancient Zarlaxian whose species had evolved specifically to mediate conflicts, floated down to the center of the arena in its gravity-nullifying field. "The terms of Kerchektveks have been accepted by both parties." The arbiter's melodious voice echoed through the arena. "As is tradition, the challenge consists of 5 trials, each to be completed consecutively without pause. Survival constitutes victory. Incapacitation or death constitutes defeat." The arbiter turned its elongated sensory appendages toward each combatant in turn. "Are you prepared to begin?" "I was born ready," Dante replied. "I will honor my ancestors with the blood of this presumptuous creature." Kazurkthan clicked. "Very well." The arbiter ascended back to the gallery. "The first trial begins now." A deep rumbling filled the arena as sections of the floor began to reconfigure. Walls emerged, creating a labyrinthine structure. The gravity increased perceptibly. Olivia could see Dante adjusting something on his exoframe in response. "Trial 1, the Maze of Ancestors," the announcement system intoned. "Combatants must navigate to the center while avoiding the Guardians." "Guardians," Admiral Fitzgerald murmured. As if in answer, piercing shrieks echoed through the arena. From concealed chambers within the maze, creatures emerged that looked like nightmares given physical form. 8-limbed predators with multiple rows of serrated teeth and chitinous armor that resembled the Cracks' own exoskeletons, but with a more primitive feral design. "Ancestral predators," Olivia whispered. "The apex hunters from the Cracks' homeworld." The creatures moved with shocking speed, disappearing into the maze in search of prey. The viewing screens positioned around the gallery showed both combatants from multiple angles. Warlord Kazurkthan moved with brutal efficiency, navigating the maze through what appeared to be ancestral memory. When one of the predators lunged at him from a side passage, he met it with a head-on charge, his larger, more evolved exoskeleton cracking through the creature's armor. The gallery of Cracks clicked in approval. Meanwhile, Dante was not fighting at all. "What is he doing?" Admiral Fitzgerald leaned forward. Dante had pressed himself against a wall and appeared to be manipulating controls on his suit. A soft humming emanated from his equipment, and slowly, Almost imperceptibly, he began to fade from view. Not completely invisible, but blending into the background like an advanced camouflage system. Adaptive thermoptic camouflage, Olivia explained. It's still experimental, but it masks both visual presence and thermal signatures. On screen, they watched as one of the predators stalked down the corridor where Dante was hidden. It paused, sensory appendages twitching as it searched for prey. It passed within inches of the human, then continued onward, unable to detect him. "That's cheating!" A Cracks diplomat clicked loudly from nearby. "Actually," Olivia couldn't resist replying, "your own rules state that the trial is to navigate the maze while avoiding the Guardians. Avoidance is precisely what he's doing." The Cracks' mandibles clicked in frustrated agreement. On screen, Dante continued his careful progress through the maze, using a combination of the camouflage technology and some sort of scanning device to map his route. Whenever a predator approached, he simply froze and let it pass by, undetected. Warlord Kazurkthan, meanwhile, had adopted the more traditional Cracks approach of simply fighting through every obstacle, leaving a trail of injured or dead predators in his wake. He reached the center of the maze first, mandibles spread in triumph. The gallery screens showed Dante still making his methodical way through the labyrinth, about 2/3 of the way to the center. "He's too slow," Admiral Fitzgerald muttered. "The Warlord's going to complete all 5 trials before Dante even finishes the first." "I don't think that's how it works, sir," Olivia replied. "Look." The maze had begun reconfiguring itself again, the walls sliding away. Warlord Kazurkthan remained at the center, while Dante continued his careful approach. The remaining predators were recalled to their chambers. "The first trial concludes," the announcement system declared. "Both combatants have reached the objective within the allotted time." "Both?" The Cracks section erupted in confused clicking. The senior arbiter's voice cut through the noise. "Ambassador Reed completed the primary objective of reaching the center zone before time expiration. His method, while unconventional, is valid under the rules of Kershak to Vex." As the maze fully receded, Dante deactivated his camouflage and gave a cheerful wave to the gallery. The Warlord's mandibles clicked in what was clearly irritation. "The second trial begins," the announcement system continued without pause. The floor of the arena began to glow red, temperature readings on the gallery displays climbing rapidly. What had been solid material moments before began to liquefy, turning into a bubbling field of molten rock with only scattered solid platforms remaining. Trial 2, the Crucible of Endurance. Combatants must remain within the arena for the duration of the trial without leaving the designated zones. The designated zones appeared to be the rapidly diminishing solid platforms, which were themselves beginning to heat up from the surrounding magma. Warlord Kazurkthan immediately adapted, his exoskeleton changing color slightly as it adjusted to the extreme heat. The Cracks evolved on a tectonically active world. Their biology was designed to withstand temperatures that would cook most other species alive. Dante, for his part, was already adjusting controls on his suit. The external layers reconfigured, reflecting panels deploying to create a heat shield. He crouched on one of the larger platforms, minimizing his contact with the superheated surface. "Heat shielding from our volcanic research stations," Olivia explained to the Admiral. "Designed to withstand direct contact with magma flows during sample collection." "Clever," the Admiral acknowledged. "But how long can the power supply last?" As if in answer to his question, Dante deployed small probes from his backpack apparatus. They embedded themselves in the molten rock around his platform and began to glow. "He's using thermoelectric converters," Olivia realized aloud. "He's harvesting power from the temperature differential." The trial continued for what felt like an eternity. The platforms continued to shrink, forcing both combatants to adjust their positions repeatedly. Warlord Kazurkthan seemed perfectly comfortable, the heat having minimal effect on his evolved biology. Dante's technological solutions were effective, but required constant adjustment as systems approached their tolerance limits. Finally, when it seemed the human's equipment must surely fail, the molten rock began to cool rapidly. "The second trial concludes," the announcement declared. "Both combatants have endured the crucible." The gallery buzzed with surprised conversation. No one had expected the human to survive even one trial, let alone 2. The Warlord turned his iridescent eyes toward Dante. "Your technology serves you well, human, but it cannot save you from what comes next." "We'll see," Dante replied, already reconfiguring his equipment for the next challenge. Trial 3, the Grasp of Ancestors. Combatants must withstand the crushing embrace. The floor solidified once more, but instead of returning to its neutral state, it began to ripple. Gravitational distortion fields activated, creating localized zones of intense pressure. The gallery displays showed the gravity increasing to 3, then 4, then 5 times Earth normal. Warlord Kazurkthan dropped to all 6 of his limbs, spreading his weight to better withstand the crushing force. His exoskeleton, evolved for a high-gravity world, handled the pressure with minimal strain. Dante's approach was once again technological. His exoframe components locked into position, creating a supportive structure that distributed the gravitational load. Still, it was clear from his movements that he was struggling more than the Warlord. Even with assistance, that's got to be pushing human physiological limits, Admiral Fitzgerald observed. The exoframe can handle the structural load, Olivia replied. But his cardiovascular system is another matter. His heart has to work against that gravity to pump blood to his brain. As the gravity continued to increase, Dante activated another system. Small nodes on his suit pulsed rhythmically, particularly around his legs and torso. Counterpressure systems, Olivia explained, like what fighter pilots use to prevent blackouts during high-G maneuvers. The trial continued, with gravity fluctuating unpredictably across the arena. Both combatants were forced to move from zone to zone as safe areas became death traps and vice versa. The Warlord moved with practiced ease, clearly familiar with the patterns. Dante relied heavily on his suit's sensors to predict the fluctuations, sometimes only barely escaping crushing zones before they activated. At one point, a miscalculation sent him stumbling into a zone just as its gravity spiked to nearly 8 times Earth normal. His exoframe creaked audibly, components straining against forces they were never designed to withstand. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed certain that the human would be crushed. Instead, Dante activated what appeared to be his final emergency system, a localized anti-gravity field that created just enough counterforce to allow him to crawl to safety. The device sparked and failed immediately afterward, clearly burned out from the effort. The third trial concludes, the announcement system declared after what seemed an eternity. Both combatants have withstood the grasp. The gravity normalized, and both competitors took a moment to recover. Warlord Kazurkthan appeared largely unaffected, though his breathing was slightly more rapid than before. Dante was visibly exhausted, his suit showing signs of stress and damage. "Your technology fails you, human," the Warlord clicked. "The remaining trials will destroy what little remains of your devices." Dante's voice came through slightly labored, but still determined. "You know what they say about humans, Warlord? We're like cockroaches, incredibly difficult to kill and twice as annoying. I am unfamiliar with these cockroaches, but I will ensure your species learns respect through your defeat. Trial 4. The Void of Ancestors. Combatants must endure the emptiness between worlds." The arena's environmental systems changed dramatically. The air began to thin as atmospheric pressure decreased rapidly. Temperature plummeted toward absolute zero. The floor developed a crystalline sheen of flash-frozen gases. "Vacuum conditions," Admiral Fitzgerald stated grimly. "The cracks can survive brief exposure to space." Indeed, Warlord Kazurkthan's exoskeleton had sealed completely, small openings closing to preserve his internal atmosphere. His movements slowed slightly in the extreme cold, but remained purposeful. Dante's suit had automatically sealed at the first sign of pressure drop, his helmet now fully deployed. The external layers of his outfit had reconfigured again, this time creating an insulating barrier against the cold. The power pack on his back glowed more intensely as it diverted energy to life support systems. "Standard vacuum survival protocol," Olivia commented. "But I don't know how long his power will last after the strain of the previous trials." The Void trial proved to be less about movement and more about endurance. Both combatants were required to remain in designated areas as the conditions cycled between different extremes, near vacuum to crushing pressure, absolute zero to intense radiation. Dante's technological solutions continued to adapt, but with diminishing effectiveness. Systems that had been damaged in previous trials failed completely, forcing emergency rerouting of power and functionality. His movements became increasingly labored as his suit struggled to maintain life support with failing components. Warlord Kazurkthan, while visibly affected by the extreme conditions, maintained a biological advantage. The cracks had evolved to survive brief exposures to almost any environmental extreme their homeworld could produce. Just when it seemed Dante's systems would fail completely, the environmental controls began to normalize. "The fourth trial concludes," the announcement stated. "Both combatants have endured the void." The gallery was now in a state of stunned silence. No non-cracks had ever survived to the fourth trial, let alone completed it. The cracks delegation's mandibles clicked in agitated patterns that required no translation. They were deeply unsettled by this turn of events. As the atmosphere returned to standard conditions, Dante's helmet retracted, revealing his face for the first time since the challenge began. He was pale and sweating profusely, but his eyes remained alert and determined. His suit was in tatters, multiple systems offline or barely functioning. "I confess, human," Warlord Kazurkthan clicked. Your species' reputation for improbable survival is well earned. But the final trial cannot be overcome with failing technology. Let me worry about that, Dante replied, checking his systems with increasingly limited options. The final trial begins, the announcement system declared. Trial 5. The Confrontation of Ancestors. Combatants must face their challenger in direct combat. The arena cleared completely, leaving an empty circular space. The two combatants stood at opposite sides, facing each other across the barren field. Direct combat, Admiral Fitzgerald muttered. This is where it ends. Olivia wasn't so sure. Dante wouldn't have accepted the challenge if he didn't have a plan for all 5 trials. What plan could possibly work against a Cracks in hand-to-hand combat? Their exoskeletons can withstand small arms fire. On the arena floor, Warlord Kazurkthan moved toward the center, his posture reflecting confidence and strength despite the trials he had endured. Come, human, face your end with dignity. Dante remained where he was, seemingly making final adjustments to his damaged equipment. Quick question before we start. The rules of this trial specify direct combat between challengers, correct? Yes, the warlord clicked impatiently. No environmental factors, no external assistance. Just you and me, as our ancestors would have fought. Perfect. Dante smiled, and then activated his communicator. Thompson, now would be good. Before anyone could react, a pinpoint of light appeared in the center of the arena. A small quantum teleportation field, just large enough to transport a single object. When the light faded, a simple sealed container sat on the floor between the combatants. The gallery erupted in confusion. The Cracks delegation clicked furiously about interference and violations of the rules. The senior arbiter's voice cut through the chaos. This appears to be a violation of the trial parameters. No external objects may be introduced during the confrontation. With respect, Arbiter, Dante called up to the gallery. The rules state that no external assistance may be provided during the trial. This container was transported before the trial officially began, when the Warlord and I were still at our starting positions. The combat itself hasn't started yet. The Arbiter consulted with several legal experts before responding. The Ambassador's interpretation is technically correct. The confrontation begins when both combatants engage. As neither has yet moved to attack, the trial has not formally commenced. The Warlord's mandibles clicked furiously. This is meaningless delay. Whatever weapon you've had delivered cannot harm me. Oh, it's not a weapon, Dante replied, moving toward the container. It's a diplomatic solution. He reached down and opened the container, revealing... Is that... coffee? Admiral Fitzgerald squinted at the steaming liquid inside what appeared to be a thermal carafe. Not just any coffee, Olivia replied, her eyes widening in sudden understanding. That's Kona Reserve, the Ambassador's personal stash. Down in the arena, Dante carefully lifted the carafe and 2 cups from the container. Warlord Kazurkthan, before we engage in what would undoubtedly be a memorable, if brief, physical confrontation, I'd like to offer you something from my world. A diplomatic courtesy, if you will. The Warlord's iridescent eyes narrowed suspiciously. You offer refreshment before combat? Is this some human ritual? In a manner of speaking. Dante poured the rich, dark liquid into both cups, the aroma wafting through the arena. On Earth, we often negotiate over drinks. It creates a neutral context for discussion. We are beyond negotiation, human. This is HFY. Humor me. Consider it my final request before you separate my squishy head from my equally squishy body. Dante held out one of the cups. I promise it's not poisoned. I'll drink first if you like. The gallery watched in stunned silence as the human ambassador took a sip from his cup, closed his eyes briefly in apparent enjoyment, then extended the other cup toward the massive alien warlord. Kazurkthan's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion, curiosity, or perhaps a reluctant respect for the human's composure in the face of certain death. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted the cup, adapting his grip to the human-designed vessel. What is this substance? He clicked, examining the liquid. Coffee. Specifically, single-origin Kona Reserve from the volcanic slopes of Hawaii. One of Earth's most prized agricultural products. Dante took another appreciative sip. The volcanic soil creates a unique mineral profile that... You delay the inevitable with talk of dirt and plants. Despite his words, the warlord brought the cup to his sensory appendages, analyzing the aroma. Not delaying, sharing. Dante watched expectantly as the warlord cautiously tasted the coffee. What happened next would be discussed in xenobiological circles for decades. The warlord's entire exoskeleton shuddered. His iridescent eyes widened to their full aperture, all 4 lens caps retracting completely. A series of rapid clicks emanated from his mandibles, so fast that the translation system struggled to keep up, rendering only fragments. Chemical complexity, neural stimulation, flavor profile. Good, isn't it? Dante smiled. The caffeine compound has an interesting effect on most carbon-based nervous systems. For humans, it's a pleasant stimulant. I'm guessing from your reaction that it has a compatible, if perhaps more intense, interaction with Cracks biochemistry. The warlord drained the cup in a single motion, then held it out wordlessly for more. Dante obliged, refilling both their cups. Here's my proposal, warlord, he said conversationally. Instead of finishing this ritual combat where you will almost certainly kill me, leading to a diplomatic incident that will delay the mining treaty by years, if not decades, why don't we discuss an arrangement that benefits both our species? Xerxthen's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he savored his second cup. I am listening. The Orion Beta system you're so interested in? Earth is willing to cede primary mining rights to the Cracks' hegemony. Dante sipped his coffee calmly as a fresh wave of shocked murmurs swept through the gallery. You would surrender the richest iridium deposits discovered in the last century? The warlord's translator couldn't quite hide his suspicion. Not surrender, share with a 70-30 split in your favor. Dante topped off the warlord's cup again. In exchange, Earth receives exclusive rights to establish coffee plantations on the 3rd moon of Cracks Prime. The toxic wasteland. It is uninhabitable even to us. To you, perhaps. But it has exactly the right soil chemistry, atmospheric composition, and gravity for coffee cultivation. Those toxic heavy metals? Perfect for producing beans with flavor profiles you can't get anywhere else in the galaxy. The warlord stared at his now empty cup with new understanding. And you would supply the hegemony with this substance? At very reasonable rates, with the Cracks receiving preferential trading status compared to other conclave species. Dante set down his cup. My final offer is this. We end this challenge with both of us walking away alive, sign a mutually beneficial treaty, and I'll throw in a year's supply of my personal reserve for your immediate enjoyment while the trade routes are established. For several long moments, the warlord remained motionless, his exoskeleton reflecting the arena lights as his compound eyes studied the human ambassador. The gallery held its collective breath, or equivalent respiratory suspension. Finally, Xerxthen's mandibles clicked decisively. Your terms are acceptable. The arena's announcement system seemed almost confused. The final trial concludes. Both combatants have reached an agreement. The senior arbiter floated down to the arena floor. This is unprecedented. Vkr'lak has never ended in negotiation rather than combat. Then perhaps it's time for new precedents, Dante suggested, gathering the coffee set back into its container. Evolution is the way of all species, is it not? The arbiter speaks truth. Warlord Xerxthen clicked, his translator rendering his tone as contemplative. For 12,000 cycles, Vkr'lak has tested our warriors' ability to survive. Yet the greatest survival skill is adaptation. He turned to face the Cracks delegation. The human has demonstrated a different kind of strength, one worthy of respect. The Cracks section of the gallery erupted in a symphony of clicks that the translation system couldn't fully process, but which clearly represented intense debate. Eventually, a consensus seemed to emerge, and the clicking harmonized into a more unified pattern. The challenge is complete, the senior arbiter declared. By the ancient laws of Vkr'lak, when both challengers survive all 5 trials, they are considered equals in the eyes of the ancestors. The treaty negotiations will proceed on these terms. I still can't believe you risked galactic war over coffee beans, Olivia said, shaking her head as they packed up their offices 3 weeks later. The newly signed Orion Beta Treaty had been ratified by both Earth government and the Cracks hegemony in record time. Not just any coffee beans, Dante corrected, carefully wrapping his prized manual brewing equipment. The most expensive coffee beans in history. Do you realize what exclusive cultivation rights on a moon are worth? About 30% of a duridium-rich star system, apparently. Precisely, and more importantly, the foundation for a lasting peace. He grinned. The Cracks aren't going to attack their primary supplier of what their biochemistry apparently experiences as the greatest neurological pleasure possible. Turning an apex predator species into caffeine addicts, that's your diplomatic legacy. I prefer to think of it as creating mutual interdependence through trade of cultural commodities. Dante sealed the last crate. Besides, the crack scientists are already developing their own unique brewing methods. Warlord Kazurkthan sent me a sample of something they're calling exoskeleton press. Strongest coffee I've ever had. Made my left arm go numb for an hour. Olivia's comm unit beeped with an incoming transmission. "Speaking of the Warlord," she said, checking the display, "the Cracks delegation is requesting your presence for the ceremonial first planting on Moon 3. Apparently, they're naming the initial cultivation zone after you." "The Reed Plantation," Dante nodded approvingly. "Has a nice ring to it." "Actually, they're calling it the Clever Monkey's Last Stand." Dante laughed. "Even better. It'll sell for triple the price with a name like that." He paused at the door, looking back at the office that had been the site of so many diplomatic crises and unlikely solutions. "You know, Thompson, I think this assignment has been my favorite so far. Because you nearly got yourself killed in ritual combat with a 9-foot battle tank alien?" "No," he replied with unexpected sincerity. "Because we found a way to turn ancient enemies into trading partners over a cup of coffee. That's what diplomacy should be." As they walked toward the shuttle bay, Admiral Fitzgerald fell into step beside them. "Ambassador Reed, I've been instructed to inform you that in light of your unorthodox success, Earth Command is considering a new diplomatic initiative with the Varaxians. The silicon-based hive mind that communicates through crystalline resonance?" Dante's eyes lit up with interest. "What could we possibly trade with them?" "Apparently their analysis of human music has detected frequencies that create pleasurable harmonics within their crystal structures, particularly something called heavy metal." Dante's smile slowly widened. "Lieutenant Commander Thompson, cancel our transport. We're going to need a new requisition form." "For what?" Olivia asked, already dreading the answer. "Electric guitars, as many as you can find." He clapped his hands together enthusiastically. "I believe it's time to introduce the galaxy to the diplomatic potential of a good old-fashioned rock concert." Olivia closed her eyes briefly. 2 years, 11 months until retirement. "I can make it." But even as she mentally updated her countdown, she couldn't help but smile. The galaxy was a strange, dangerous, and occasionally wonderful place, especially with humans involved. "One condition," she said, opening her eyes. "This time I get to pick the music." "Deal," Dante agreed, already striding purposefully toward their next improbable diplomatic triumph. "But fair warning, the fate of interspecies harmony may rest on your playlist." Behind them, Admiral Fitzgerald shook his head in a mixture of exasperation and admiration. "God help the galaxy," he muttered. "The humans are getting creative." "Well, that's a solid what the actual fuck from me," Lieutenant Zoe Harrison muttered, peering through the scope of her M110 sniper rifle. The dusty brown hills of the Nevada test range stretched out before her, the targets mere specks in the distance. Behind her stood a 7-foot-tall reptilian alien with silver-blue scales and 4 eyes, all of which were currently giving the human equivalent of an eye roll. "Your projectile weapons are most inefficient," stated Ambassador Vkr'lak of the Galactic Hegemony. His voice carried that special tone reserved for adults explaining simple concepts to particularly dense children. "Our analysis indicates your success rate is approximately 27.3% at this range. Most disappointing." Zoe fought the urge to swing her rifle in his direction. Instead, she took a deep breath of the desert air, the scent of gunpowder and sage filling her nostrils. "With all due respect, Ambassador," she said, not bothering to hide her grin, "you might want to hold your judgment until you understand what you're looking at." The meeting between humanity and the Galactic Hegemony had gone about as well as could be expected when a vastly technologically superior civilization shows up uninvited in your solar system. There had been the usual posturing, threats, and eventually treaties. Now, 6 months into cultural exchange, Earth's military leaders had finally agreed to demonstrate some of humanity's weapons technology. It wasn't going well. "I understand perfectly," Ambassador Vkr'lak replied, his secondary eyelids blinking in what the human delegation had learned was a sign of dismissal. "Your species has only recently discovered basic metallurgy and rudimentary ballistics. Your weapons fire unguided metal projectiles using chemical propellants. No gravitic assistance, no targeting AI, no plasma containment. It's quaint." Next to Zoe, Major Tomas Okafor of the UN Joint Military Command gave a polite cough that poorly disguised a laugh. "Ambassador," Okafor said, "Lieutenant Harrison is one of our finest marksmen. Perhaps you'd care to observe a full demonstration before rendering judgment?" Vkr'lak's upper arms performed the hegemony gesture of acquiescence. a sort of shrug that somehow managed to look condescending despite the alien physiology. "Proceed," he said. Zoe resisted the urge to flip off the ambassador and instead settled back into position. She adjusted her stance, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. The wind was picking up, a common afternoon occurrence in the Nevada desert. Her spotter, Corporal Dmitry Volkov, murmured wind speed and direction into her ear. 5 rounds, she announced, then squeezed the trigger. 5 shots rang out in quick succession, the rifle bucking against her shoulder with each one. Through her scope, she could see that none of her shots had hit the central target. Ambassador Vkr'lak made a sound resembling a tea kettle boiling over, the hegemony equivalent of a derisive snort. "As I predicted. 5 shots, 0 successes. Your accuracy is—" "Computer," Okafor interrupted. "Display impacts." The large screen on the observation wall lit up, showing a thermal image of the target area. 5 distinct heat signatures glowed on the display, but none were on the target itself. "As you can see," Okafor continued smoothly, "Lieutenant Harrison's shots struck exactly where they were intended to strike." He gestured to the screen. "The first round hit the rock 3 meters to the left of the target, ricocheted, and struck the supply cache we had hidden behind the ridge. The second round struck the buried communications relay 20 meters behind the target. The third disabled the power generator for the entire compound. The fourth hit the fuel cell of the unmanned drone we had stationed there. And the fifth—" He paused for effect. "The 5th round struck a bullet from a previous firing exercise that had lodged in a tree, causing it to detonate and send fragments into what would be the command tent in a real engagement." For the first time since their arrival on Earth, Ambassador Vkr'lak was speechless. His 4 eyes blinked asynchronously, a sign, the human delegation had learned, of extreme confusion. But none of those were the designated target," he finally managed. Zoe stood, brushing desert dust from her uniform. "That's because, Ambassador, humans have a saying, only amateurs shoot at what they can see." The hegemony battlecruiser, Indomitable Reason, hung in high orbit above Earth like a silvery dagger. In the ship's main conference chamber, Ambassador Vkr'lak was giving his report to the assembled hegemony command staff. "And so it appears that the humans have developed an entirely different approach to warfare than anything in our records," he concluded, his voice carrying the faint harmonic that indicated deep concern. Fleet Commander ZX Teal leaned forward, her bony crest flushing a dark purple of skepticism. "You expect us to believe that these primitives, who have barely achieved rudimentary spaceflight, pose any kind of tactical concern?" Vkr'lak activated a hologram showing the firing range demonstration. "With respect, Commander, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood human warfare. Their approach is unpredictable." "Unpredictability is merely a sign of desperation," scoffed Subcommander Vernas, his scales rippling with amusement. "Any species with proper battlefield simulations optimizes for efficiency." "That's just it," Vkr'lak insisted. "The humans don't optimize for efficiency. They optimize for effectiveness. And they have a disturbing tendency to cheat." "Cheat?" The word had no direct translation in the hegemony language, and the translator implant struggled with the concept. "They deliberately create situations where established rules and expectations don't apply," Vkr'lak explained. "For instance, observe this demonstration they arranged." The hologram shifted to show a different scene. A human military vehicle, what they called a tank, facing a series of barriers and targets. The humans were asked to demonstrate their vehicle's ability to overcome obstacles and engage targets. Vkr'lak narrated. "Watch what happened." In the recording, the tank approached the first obstacle, a deep trench. Instead of attempting to cross it, the tank fired its main gun at a nearby hillside, causing a landslide that filled part of the trench. It then crossed over this improvised bridge. "Now observe the target engagement," Vkr'lak continued. The tank approached a hardened bunker target, but, instead of firing directly at it, launched what the humans called a smoke grenade. Under cover of the smoke, the tank circled behind the bunker and fired at its more vulnerable rear. "This is not how our battle doctrines would approach the problem," Vkr'lak concluded. "And when I inquired about this, the human commander merely said, 'If you find yourself in a fair fight, your planning has failed.'" The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. Fleet Commander Zex Teal's crest had shifted to the pale blue of contemplation. "This is concerning. Our simulations assume rational actors optimizing for known parameters. If the humans are deliberately subverting expected behavior patterns—" "Precisely," Vkr'lak said. "And there's more. I believe we need to reconsider our entire assessment of human combat capabilities." "You're joking, right?" Zoe asked, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. They want to what now? Major Okafor's expression remained deadly serious as he slid the tablet across the mess hall table. The hegemony has formally requested a joint training exercise with our forces. Specifically, they've asked for you to help design it. Zoe picked up the tablet, scanning the official request with growing disbelief. The mess hall around them buzzed with the usual lunchtime activity, but she barely noticed it. This has got to be some kind of trap, she muttered. One day they're looking down their scaly noses at our primitive projectile weapons, and the next they want us to train them? No way. Okafor shrugged. The diplomatic corps thinks it's legitimate. Apparently Ambassador Vkr'lak made quite an impression when he returned to the fleet. Something about unpredictable tactical innovations and asymmetric approach vectors. So, what? They were impressed by the fact that I can make a bullet ricochet? More like they were shocked that we would even try, Okafor replied, stealing a French fry from Zoe's plate. According to our Xenopsych team, the hegemony's entire military doctrine is built around predictability and optimization. Their computers calculate the most efficient way to win a battle, and that's what they do, every time, without variation. Zoe considered this. That's actually kind of terrifying, and also really dumb. It's worked for them so far. They've conquered or assimilated 17 sentient species across 3 galactic sectors. Yeah, but... Zoe gestured with her fork. What happens when they encounter something their computers haven't seen before? They just... blue screen? Okafor smiled. That's exactly what happened when they watched you shoot, Lieutenant. Their brains blue screened, and now they want to know how we do it. Do what? Think for ourselves? Essentially, yes. Okafor's expression grew more serious. The Joint Chiefs see this as an opportunity. If we can get the hegemony to respect our capabilities, maybe even fear them a little, we buy ourselves time. Time we desperately need if we're going to have any chance against their technology. Zoe sighed, pushing away her half-eaten lunch. Fine, but I want it on record that I think this is a terrible idea. And when it inevitably goes sideways, I expect full immunity from court-martial when I have to shoot an alien diplomat. Noted, Okafor said, his lips twitching. Just try not to start an interstellar war before Thursday. I have theater tickets. The joint training facility had been constructed with remarkable speed on an abandoned military base in the Australian outback. The red earth stretched to the horizon, broken only by the occasional scraggly tree and the gleaming silver structures the hegemony had erected. Zoe stood at the entrance to what the aliens had designated Tactical Simulation Zone Alpha, sweating in the midday heat and wondering, not for the first time, how she'd gotten roped into this mess. Lieutenant Harrison. Ambassador Vkr'lak approached, flanked by 2 hegemony soldiers whose sleek armor made them look like walking mercury. We are most appreciative of your agreement to participate. Happy to help, Zoe lied, forcing a smile, though I'm still not entirely clear on what you want me to do. Simple, Vkr'lak said, gesturing toward the training zone. We wish to understand your approach to combat problem-solving. We have constructed a series of scenarios based on our understanding of Earth military challenges. We would like you to navigate them while explaining your thought process. Zoe glanced at these scenarios in question. From what she could see, the aliens had created a sort of obstacle course that looked like it had been designed by someone whose only understanding of human warfare came from watching American Ninja Warrior. And your soldiers will be running the same course? She asked. They will observe first, then attempt to implement your methodologies, Vkr'lak confirmed. Uh-huh. Zoe exchanged a look with Corporal Volkov, who had been assigned as her assistant for this farce. And what exactly is the objective here? To reach the end point while neutralizing all hostile elements, Vkr'lak explained as if it were obvious. Right, Zoe said, unslinging her rifle. Standard rules of engagement? Vkr'lak made the hegemony gesture of affirmation. The simulation uses non-lethal energy markers. A hit will be registered on your or your opponent's equipment. Zoe nodded, surveying the course again with a more tactical eye. Something wasn't adding up. The obstacles were challenging but straightforward. Walls to climb, trenches to cross, barriers to navigate. The hostile elements appeared to be automated turrets and drone units. But the layout... When you say reach the end point, you mean that structure there? She pointed to a small bunker at the far end of the course. Correct, Zoe frowned. And these markers along the way? We need to hit each one? They are checkpoints, yes. She studied the course one more time, then turned to Volkov. Dmitri, what do you think? Direct approach or flanking maneuver? Volkov squinted at the course. The turret placement favors a direct approach through the center. They've left the flanks more heavily defended. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Zoe turned back to Vkr'lak. Before we start, just to be clear, the objective is to reach that bunker while hitting all checkpoints and neutralizing hostile elements, correct? Correct, Vkr'lak confirmed. And the success criteria is completion of all objectives with minimal damage sustained. Zoe nodded slowly. Okay, one last question. Are there any rules about how we're allowed to approach the course? Vkr'lak seemed confused by the question. You are to navigate the obstacles as presented. As presented, Zoe repeated. But not necessarily in the order presented? Now Vkr'lak looked truly perplexed. I suppose not. The logical progression would be from start to finish. Right, logical. Zoe grinned. I think we're ready to begin. Vkr'lak moved to the observation platform while Zoe and Volkov prepared at the starting line. What are you thinking, LT? Volkov asked quietly. I'm thinking the ambassador is about to get another lesson in human tactics, Zoe replied. Follow my lead and be ready to move fast. When the starting signal sounded, Zoe did something that clearly shocked the observing aliens. She turned and ran in the opposite direction of the course. Lieutenant! Vkr'lak's voice came over the communication system. You are proceeding in the incorrect direction! No rule against it, Zoe called back, continuing to sprint away from the course. She and Volkov circled wide around the training zone, approaching it from the far side, near the objective bunker. From this angle, they could see what the course designers had intended to be the hard part of the challenge. A series of overlapping fields of fire from the automated turrets that would make a direct approach to the bunker nearly impossible. Classic kill zone, Volkov observed. They want us to fight through the entire course just to end up pinned down here. Exactly, Zoe agreed. But from this side, they had positioned themselves behind the turrets, which were designed to target threats coming from the course, not from the supposedly empty terrain behind them. Take out the 3 on the left, Zoe instructed. I'll get the ones on the right, on 3. Their rifles cracked in the dry Australian air, and within seconds, all 6 turrets had been neutralized by shots to their vulnerable rear sensors. Now for the checkpoints, Zoe said, slinging her rifle. We'll work backwards. They entered the bunker, the supposed final objective, first, then methodically worked their way backward through the course, hitting each checkpoint in reverse order. When they encountered drones or other hostile elements, they neutralized them from unexpected angles, often using the terrain features that had been designed as obstacles to provide them with cover instead. 23 minutes after they had started, Zoe and Volkov strolled across the official starting line, the last checkpoint on their reverse journey. Simulation complete, announced the automated system. All objectives achieved. Damage sustained, 0%. On the observation platform, Ambassador Vkr'lak and the hegemony soldiers stood in stunned silence. How? Vkr'lak finally managed. How did you know to approach the course from the rear? Zoe shrugged, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. We didn't. But when I saw the layout, it was pretty obvious that you'd designed it to funnel us into a kill zone at the end. So instead of playing by your implied rules, we changed the game. But that's not how the simulation was designed to be completed. One of the hegemony soldiers protested. Yeah, that's kind of the point, Zoe replied. In real combat, the enemy doesn't give you a neat set of rules to follow. They try to kill you in the most efficient way possible. Your job is to figure out how to complete your mission without dying, and sometimes that means throwing out the conventional approach entirely. The aliens exchanged looks that even across species boundaries were easy to interpret as profound discomfort. I think, Vkr'lak said slowly, we will need to reconsider our training methodologies. 3 days and 17 increasingly complex scenarios later, Zoe was beginning to wonder if the hegemony was capable of learning. Each time she and Volkov, sometimes joined by other human soldiers, encountered a new challenge, they found creative ways to subvert the aliens' expectations, using deliberate failures to create new opportunities, sacrificing efficiency for surprise, or sometimes just doing the opposite of what the scenario designers had clearly intended. And each time, the hegemony observers were shocked, confused, and clearly disturbed. I don't think they're getting it, Volkov said as they sat in the mess tent, picking at what was supposedly spaghetti bolognese, but looked more like worms in bloody mud. Getting what? Zoe asked, giving up on the pasta and reaching for her bread roll instead. The whole concept of tactical improvisation, Volkov explained. It's like they're missing some fundamental cognitive capacity. Every time we do something unexpected, they study it, codify it, and then try to create a rule for it, completely missing the point that the whole advantage is in not following predictable rules. Zoe considered this as she chewed her bread. Maybe that's evolutionary. Their species developed in a different environment. Maybe predictability was an advantage for them. Or maybe it's cultural, suggested Captain Wei, who had joined their table. As one of the few xenopsychologists with military training, Wei had been observing the exercises with professional interest. The hegemony is old. We're talking tens of thousands of years of unified government. After that long under a single system, innovation might become less valuable than conformity. Whatever the reason, Zoe said, it's becoming pretty clear that they're not going to suddenly start thinking like humans. Which begs the question, why are we teaching them our tactics at all? Aren't we just giving away our only advantage? Wei smiled enigmatically. Are we, though? Consider this. What if the very thing that makes human tactics effective against them is something they're fundamentally incapable of replicating? You mean they can study our approaches all day long, but they'll never be able to implement them because their brains just don't work that way? Volkov asked. Exactly, Wei confirmed. And more importantly, what if this whole exercise isn't about them learning our tactics, but about them learning to fear them? Zoe sat back, a slow smile spreading across her face as she caught Wei's meaning. Psychological warfare, we're not training them, we're intimidating them. Bingo, Wei said, tapping the side of her nose. The Joint Chiefs don't expect the hegemony to start fighting like humans. They want the hegemony to start worrying about humans fighting like humans. Is that why they've been recording everything we do? Volkov asked, glancing toward the corner of the mess tent where two hegemony technicians were not so subtly monitoring their conversation. I'd bet my next month's pay that those recordings are being studied by their high command right now, Wei confirmed. And I'd bet the month after that they're absolutely losing their scaly minds trying to figure out how to defend against an enemy that doesn't fight according to predictable patterns. Zoe laughed for the first time in days. So when I've been teaching them that humans are tricky, unpredictable bastards who don't fight fair, you've been doing exactly what High Command wants, Wei finished for her, making the biggest, baddest military force in the known galaxy second-guess themselves. Aboard the Indomitable Reason, Fleet Commander ZX Teal was losing her composure, a rare occurrence for a hegemony officer of her rank. This cannot be correct, she insisted, her crest flaring an alarming shade of orange as she reviewed the latest training simulations. Run the predictive models again. Subcommander Vernas operated the console with careful precision. I have run the simulations 17 times, Commander. The results are consistent. Using standard hegemony engagement protocols against forces employing human-style tactics results in a 62% failure rate for our forces. Impossible, Zex Teal hissed. These are primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their weapons are crude. Their defenses are practically non-existent. Their technology is inferior, yes, Ambassador Vkr'lak agreed from his position at the conference table. But their tactical approach creates complications that our systems struggle to accommodate. Explain, demanded Zex Teal. Vkr'lak activated a holographic display showing one of the training scenarios, a simulated space battle between a hegemony cruiser and a human vessel. In this simulation, we programmed the human ship with the tactical behaviors we've observed. Observe what happens when our cruiser initiates standard engagement protocols. The simulation played out, showing the hegemony cruiser approaching with overwhelming firepower. But instead of attempting to match the cruiser's strength, the human vessel executed a series of seemingly random maneuvers, including deliberately venting its reactor core to create a radiation cloud that disrupted the cruiser's sensors. This behavior makes no tactical sense, Vernas protested. They damaged their own vessel to create a temporary advantage. Yet that temporary advantage allowed them to circle behind our cruiser and attack its propulsion systems, Vkr'lak pointed out, rendering our superior firepower irrelevant if we cannot bring it to bear. So we adjust our tactics, Zex Teal said dismissively. Protect our rear approaches. We did, Vkr'lak said grimly. In the next simulation. He advanced the display to show another engagement. This time, the hegemony cruiser maintained full sensor coverage of all approach vectors. Observe what happens now. In this simulation, the human vessel appeared to suffer a catastrophic systems failure, going dark and drifting. When the hegemony cruiser approached to investigate, standard protocol for potential salvage opportunities, the human ship suddenly powered up and launched what appeared to be its own escape pods directly at the cruiser. Suicide attack? Vernas asked, his scales rippling with disgust. No, Vkr'lak corrected. The pods contained no life forms. They were packed with explosive materials. A trap. Zextiel's crest had now shifted to the deep red of anger. This is not warfare as we understand it. There is no honor in such tactics, no efficiency. With respect, Commander, Vkr'lak said carefully. The humans do not appear to value honor or efficiency in combat. They value winning. At any cost? Vernas asked. No, Vkr'lak replied thoughtfully. Not at any cost. They have moral restrictions. They avoid civilian casualties, for instance, and follow certain rules of engagement. But within those boundaries, they are disturbingly creative. Zextiel stared at the simulation results for a long moment. What are you suggesting, Ambassador? I suggest that we may need to reconsider our approach to the human species, Vkr'lak said. Our standard protocols for technological assimilation and cultural integration assume a certain rationality, a predictability, that the humans do not exhibit. Attempting to absorb them into the hegemony may prove more costly than anticipated. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. You are suggesting we abandon the standard assimilation protocol? Vernas finally asked, his voice thick with disbelief. For a single primitive species? I am suggesting, Vkr'lak replied carefully, that we may wish to consider a more diplomatic approach. Perhaps offer them protectorate status while allowing them to maintain cultural autonomy. Zextiel's crest slowly shifted to the pale blue of calculation. Your recommendation is noted, Ambassador. I will consult with the High Command. In the meantime, continue the training exercises. I want to understand every aspect of these human tactics. As the conference broke up, Vkr'lak found himself alone with Vernas in the corridor outside. You truly believe these humans are that dangerous? Vernas asked quietly. Vkr'lak's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of profound uncertainty. I believe they are unpredictable. And in my experience, unpredictability is often more dangerous than power. You're being reassigned, Major Okafor announced, dropping a folder onto the table in front of Zoe. They were sitting in a secure briefing room at the joint training facility. The Australian sun beating down on the prefab building's roof with enough intensity that the air conditioning was fighting a losing battle. Zoe could feel sweat trickling down her back as she reached for the folder. Please tell me it's somewhere with a decent climate, she said, flipping open the dossier. I've had enough heat stroke to last. She broke off as she saw the assignment details. This can't be right. It's right, Okafor confirmed, taking a seat across from her. You're being assigned as military liaison to the Hegemony diplomatic mission. You ship out to their station in orbit in 3 days. Zoe stared at him in disbelief. I'm a sniper, not a diplomat. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly the make nice with the aliens type. Which is precisely why you're perfect for the job, Okafor replied, sliding another document across the table. This came directly from the Hegemony High Command. They specifically requested you. The document was a formal diplomatic request, translated into English but still bearing the strange geometric patterns that marked official hegemony communications. They want me to continue training their military personnel, Zoe read aloud, her disbelief growing. In alternative tactical paradigms. What the hell does that mean? It means, Okafor said with a slight smile, that you scared them, Lieutenant. Congratulations. I scared them? How? By showing them that all their technological superiority might not mean squat against an enemy that doesn't fight according to their rulebook. Okafor leaned forward, his expression growing serious. The intelligence boys have been analyzing the hegemony's reaction to our training sessions. Their assessment is that the aliens are genuinely rattled by our approach to warfare. So, what? I'm supposed to go up to their space station and keep rattling them? Essentially, yes. Okafor nodded. The Joint Chiefs see this as an unprecedented opportunity. The hegemony has conquered 17 other species, Lieutenant. 17. And none of them apparently gave the aliens pause the way we have. We need to leverage that advantage. Zoe closed the folder, her mind racing. So this is about buying time, making them hesitate before they decide whether to try and conquer us. It's about more than that, Okafor corrected. It's about changing the nature of our relationship with them. Right now, they see us as primitives who might be useful as a client species. We need them to start seeing us as equals, different, but worthy of respect. And you think my showing them how to shoot around corners is going to accomplish that? I think you showing them that humans are fundamentally unpredictable might make them reconsider their usual approach to species integration. Okafor stood up. The diplomatic team will brief you on the details tomorrow. For now, consider this a heads up, and maybe think about what else you might want to teach our new alien friends about human ingenuity. After Okafor left, Zoe sat alone in the briefing room, staring at the assignment folder. This was insane. She was a soldier, not a cultural ambassador. And yet, there was something undeniably appealing about the idea of continuing to mess with the hegemony's heads. To show them that all their advanced technology and rigid protocols couldn't prepare them for good old-fashioned human creativity. Plus, she'd always wanted to see space. The Hegemony Diplomatic Station was a massive ring-shaped structure in high Earth orbit, a gleaming silver halo against the blue and white backdrop of the planet below. As the shuttle carrying Zoe and the rest of the human delegation approached, she found herself speechless for perhaps the first time in her military career. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" remarked Dr. Eliza Novak, the head of the xenobiology team and technically Zoe's superior in the delegation hierarchy. "Makes our International Space Station look like a kid's science project." "It's big," Zoe managed, which was an understatement. The station had to be at least 1 kilometer in diameter, with various structures protruding from its main ring like spokes on a wheel. "According to the specs they shared, it houses about 15,000 personnel," Novak continued. "Most of them are Hegemony citizens, but there are representatives from at least a dozen other species on board." "Other conquered species, you mean?" Zoe said quietly. Novak gave her a sharp look. "Integrated species is the diplomatic term, Lieutenant. And yes, primarily those. Which is why our mission here is so important. We're trying to avoid joining their ranks, remember?" The shuttle docked with surprising smoothness, given the different technologies involved. As the airlock cycled, Zoe adjusted her dress uniform and tried to look like someone who belonged in a diplomatic delegation, rather than someone who was calculating angles of fire out of professional habit. Ambassador Vkr'lak was waiting for them in the reception area, along with a delegation of hegemony officials and representatives of several other species. "Welcome to Orbital Diplomatic Platform 7, Vkr'lak greeted them, his scales shimmering under the station's lighting. "We are most pleased to host the first official Earth delegation to a hegemony facility." The formal introductions proceeded with the careful precision of diplomatic protocol, each member of the human team being presented to their hegemony counterparts. When it came to Zoe's turn, she noticed a distinct change in the alien's demeanor, a tensing of posture, a more careful attention. "Lieutenant Harrison," Vkr'lak said, with what she now recognized as the hegemony equivalent of a smile. "Your reputation precedes you. Fleet Commander Zxtl has expressed particular interest in your tactical demonstrations." Zoe nodded politely. "I look forward to continuing our educational exchange, Ambassador." After the formalities concluded, the human delegation was shown to their quarters, surprisingly comfortable accommodations that had been modified to suit human physiological needs. Zoe's room was Spartan by civilian standards, but luxurious compared to military barracks. A private bedroom and bathroom, a small sitting area, and even a viewport looking out toward Earth. She had just finished stowing her gear when there was a chime at her door. She opened it to find a hegemony officer standing in the corridor, one she recognized from the training exercises on Earth. "Lieutenant Harrison," the alien said, its translator rendering the words with only a slight metallic overtone. "I am Sub-Commander Vkr'lak, Chief Tactical Officer of this station. If you are not too fatigued from your journey, Fleet Commander Zxtl requests your presence at a private briefing." Zoe glanced at the time display. The delegation's first official meeting wasn't scheduled until the following morning. "Now?" "If convenient," Vkr'lak confirmed, his posture suggesting that it had better be convenient. "Lead the way," Zoe said, straightening her uniform jacket. They traversed the station's curved corridors, passing members of various species, some humanoid, others decidedly not, who gave the odd pair curious looks. Zoe noted the layout as they walked, automatically cataloging potential defensive positions and escape routes. Old habits. The fleet commander's office was located in what appeared to be a secure section of the station, requiring multiple biometric scans for access. Inside, Zoe found herself in a spacious chamber, with one entire wall consisting of a transparent viewport, looking out into open space. Fleet Commander Zxtl was standing at this viewport, her back to the door as they entered. She was taller than Vkr'lak, her scales a deeper blue with silver markings that Zoe had learned denoted high rank. "Commander," Vkr'lak announced, "Lieutenant Harrison of Earth." Zxtl turned, her 4 eyes focusing on Zoe with unsettling intensity. "Lieutenant, thank you for agreeing to this unscheduled meeting." Zoe gave a small nod. "Of course, Commander. I'm at your disposal." Zxtl gestured to a seating area designed to accommodate various physiologies. "Please, be comfortable." Zoe took a seat, noting that the chair automatically adjusted to her human proportions. Vkr'lak positioned himself by the door, his posture suggesting he was there as both aid and security. "Lieutenant," Zextiel began, her crest shifting to a neutral blue. "I have reviewed the recordings of your training sessions with our personnel. I must admit to a certain confusion." "I'd be happy to clarify anything, Commander," Zoe replied, keeping her tone carefully neutral. "Your approach to tactical problems defies our understanding," Zextiel said bluntly. "Our military doctrine is based on 10,000 years of refinement, optimal solutions derived from countless battles across hundreds of worlds. Yet you, a representative of a species that has not even achieved independent interstellar travel, consistently found ways to overcome scenarios designed by our best tactical minds." Zoe chose her words carefully. "Different perspectives can lead to different solutions, Commander. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Our history is full of examples where we had to overcome superior forces through creativity." "Yes, Ambassador Vkr'lak mentioned this concept." Zextiel's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. "What troubles me is the implication. If we cannot predict how your species would react in a given scenario, how can we establish stable diplomatic relations?" And there it was, the real reason for this meeting, or not military curiosity, but strategic assessment. "Commander," Zoe said, leaning forward slightly, "predictability isn't a prerequisite for peace. In fact, sometimes a healthy respect for an ally's capabilities, even if you don't fully understand them, can be a stronger foundation than assumed control." "An interesting perspective." Zextiel's crest shifted slightly toward a purplish hue. "Yet it contradicts the hegemony's experience. Our integrated species function harmoniously precisely because their behaviors are understood and accounted for." "With all due respect, Commander, those species are not allies. They're subjects." Zoe knew she was pushing diplomatic boundaries, but something told her directness would serve better than platitudes here. "Humans aren't interested in being subjects, but we make loyal allies when our autonomy is respected." Zextiel was silent for a long moment, her four eyes studying Zoe with unnerving focus. "You speak boldly for one in your position, Lieutenant." "I'm a soldier, not a diplomat," Zoe replied. "My job has always been to deal with reality as it is, not as I wish it to be." Unexpectedly, Zextiel made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "This directness is another trait Ambassador Vkr'lak warned me about." "Very well, Lieutenant. Reality as it is, your species possesses inferior technology but unpredictable tactical innovations that our simulations suggest would make conventional assimilation costly." "That's a polite way of saying we'd be more trouble than we're worth," Zoe observed. "Perhaps." Settle moved to a console and activated a holographic display showing Earth. "Or perhaps you represent a different kind of opportunity. The hegemony has encountered few genuinely novel approaches in recent millennia. Stagnation is a risk for any civilization that achieves dominance." Zoe felt like she was suddenly navigating a minefield without a map. "What exactly are you suggesting, Commander?" "I am suggesting, Lieutenant Harrison, that I have recommended to the High Command that Earth be offered a different arrangement than our standard integration protocol. A partnership, rather than assimilation." Zoe managed to keep her expression neutral, despite her shock. "That would be unprecedented, based on what we understand of hegemony history." "Indeed." Zextiel's crest now shifted to a shade Zoe hadn't seen before, a shimmering green gold that the briefing materials hadn't covered. "Which is why I've arranged for an expanded military exchange program, with you as its centerpiece." "Me? You have demonstrated an ability to think in ways our tactical officers cannot. I want you to continue challenging them, and by extension, challenging our assumptions." Zextiel's gaze was unnervingly direct. "We have become too comfortable with our superiority, Lieutenant. Too predictable. That is dangerous in a universe that may yet hold surprises for us." The implications were staggering. What had started as a simple demonstration of marksmanship had somehow evolved into a fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with the most powerful known civilization in the galaxy. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for that kind of responsibility," Zoe said honestly. "You have already proven otherwise," Zextiel replied. "The formal proposal will be presented to your diplomatic team tomorrow. I merely wish to inform you personally, as you are, somewhat unexpectedly, the catalyst for this change in approach." After the meeting concluded, Vkr'lak escorted Zoe back toward the human quarters. They walked in silence for several minutes before the hegemony officer spoke. "You should know," he said quietly, "that what the commander has proposed is without precedent in modern hegemony history. There will be resistance." Zoe glanced at him. "From whom?" "Various factions. Those who see deviation from established protocols as dangerous. Those who believe non-hegemony species must be controlled rather than partnered with." Vernas's scales rippled in what she now recognized as discomfort. "You have made a significant impact, Lieutenant Harrison. Not all will welcome it. Are you warning me to watch my back, Sub-Commander?" Vernas made the hegemony gesture that approximated a shrug. "I am merely providing context. Fleet Commander ZXTL sees potential in your species' unpredictability. Others may see only threat." "Great," Zoe muttered. "Interstellar politics. Just what I signed up for." "We have that in common, Lieutenant," Vernas said, with what might have been a touch of humor. "I, too, prefer the clarity of tactical problems to the murkiness of political ones." By the time Zoe returned to her quarters, her mind was racing. She had come to this station expecting to continue the training exercises, essentially, to keep the hegemony off balance while Earth's diplomats tried to negotiate terms that wouldn't result in humanity's subjugation. Now it seemed she had accidentally backed into a completely different outcome. She sent a brief, heavily encrypted message to Major Okafor. "Situation developing. Hegemony considering partnership rather than assimilation. Details tomorrow. Hope you kept those theater tickets." The next 3 weeks aboard the hegemony station were a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings, formal presentations, and, to Zoe's simultaneous amusement and frustration, more tactical demonstrations. The partnership proposal had been formally presented to the human delegation, causing a mix of cautious optimism and deep skepticism. The terms were still being negotiated, but the core concept remained. Earth would maintain its sovereignty while gaining access to certain hegemony technologies in exchange for military cooperation and the sharing of what the aliens kept referring to as alternative tactical paradigms. In practice, this meant Zoe spent most of her days in the station's vast simulation chambers, running hegemony tactical officers through scenarios designed to challenge their rigid thinking. Today's exercise was particularly entertaining. A simulated urban combat environment where the objective was to extract a high-value target from a heavily defended building. No, Zoe said, halting the simulation for the third time. "You're still approaching this like it's a mathematical equation with one correct answer." The hegemony officer, a mid-rank tactical specialist named Vkr'lak, made a gesture of frustration. "The most efficient approach is clearly to neutralize the defensive positions sequentially, creating a safe corridor for extraction." "If they were static defenses, sure," Zoe agreed. "But in urban combat against an adaptive enemy, efficiency isn't always effective. Think about what they expect you to do, then do something else." "This is contrary to all established doctrine," Vkr'lak protested. "That's the point," Zoe said, suppressing a sigh. "Reset the simulation. This time, I want you to ignore the main entrance entirely. But the building schematic clearly indicates, forget the schematic. In real urban combat, buildings have sewers, maintenance tunnels, adjacent structures. Use your imagination." Vkr'lak's scales rippled with what Zoe had learned was the hegemony equivalent of indignation, but he reset the simulation. From her observation platform, Zoe watched as the alien officer hesitantly began exploring alternatives to the frontal assault approach. It was like watching someone learn to walk, awkward, halting, but ultimately progress. "He's trying, at least," said a familiar voice behind her. Zoe turned to find Ambassador Vkr'lak entering the observation area. "Ambassador, I didn't realize you were interested in our training sessions." "I find them fascinating," Vkr'lak admitted, "particularly the psychological aspects. Do you know that Vkr'lak has requested additional shifts in the simulation chamber, outside his assigned duty hours?" "Really?" Zoe raised an eyebrow. "He spends most of our sessions looking like he wants to throw me out an airlock." "Indeed." Vkr'lak's secondary eyelids blinked in what she now recognized as amusement. "Yet he is developing what you might call an obsession with mastering these human tactics, as are several others among our junior officers." Zoe considered this. "Is that a problem?" "It is. Unprecedented," Vkr'lak replied carefully. "The hegemony military structure values consistency and predictability. Officers who display too much individual initiative are not typically promoted. But Fleet Commander ZXTL has recently adjusted the evaluation criteria for the tactical division." Vkr'lak made a gesture that Zoe had learned indicated significant change. "Officers who demonstrate adaptive problem-solving capabilities are now being flagged for accelerated advancement." Zoe let out a low whistle. That's a pretty radical shift for a culture as established as yours. Indeed. Vkr'lak seemed about to say more when an alert chimed from his communication device. He checked it, his posture immediately stiffening. It appears our time for theoretical discussions has ended. We have a situation developing. What kind of situation? Zoe asked, instantly alert. A Vkr'lak raiding vessel has been detected near Neptune. They are not responding to communication attempts. Zoe frowned. Vkr'lak? I don't think I've heard of them. They are not part of the hegemony, Vkr'lak explained, already moving toward the exit. A nomadic species known for raiding vulnerable settlements and ships. They typically avoid hegemony space, but occasionally test our boundaries. And they've decided to test those boundaries in our solar system? Zoe followed him, her training automatically kicking in. That seems like a hell of a coincidence. Indeed. Vkr'lak's voice had taken on a harmonically darker tone. Fleet Commander Zex Teal has called an emergency briefing. You are requested to attend. Me? Why? Vkr'lak's 4 eyes fixed on her with an intensity she hadn't seen before. Because, Lieutenant Harrison, this may be an opportunity to demonstrate whether your tactical innovations work in actual combat, not just simulations. The command center of the Hegemony Station was a marvel of alien technology, with holographic displays showing real-time information from throughout the solar system. Zoe felt distinctly out of place as she followed Vkr'lak into the high-security area, acutely aware of the curious and sometimes hostile looks from the Hegemony staff. Fleet Commander Zex Teal stood at the central command platform, surrounded by her senior officers. She acknowledged Zoe's arrival with a brief nod before returning her attention to the main display, which showed a strange, angular vessel moving through the outer solar system. The Vkr'lak raider entered the system approximately 7 hours ago, Zex Teal was explaining as they approached. It has ignored all communication attempts and is on a trajectory that will bring it into Earth's orbital space within 18 hours. A single raiding vessel? One of the officers questioned. The Vkr'lak typically operate in packs. Our long-range sensors detect no additional vessels, Zex Teal confirmed, which is unusual enough to warrant caution. Could it be a scout? Another officer suggested. Testing our response before a larger force arrives? Possible, Zex Teal conceded. Though it would be a suicide mission. One raider against a hegemony battlecruiser has no chance of success or escape. Zoe studied the holographic representation of the alien ship. Something about the situation didn't feel right. What exactly are the Vkr'lak known for? What kinds of targets do they typically hit? Vernas, who was manning one of the tactical stations, answered. They are scavengers and opportunists. They target isolated outposts, damaged vessels, or primitive colonies that lack significant defenses. They steal resources, technology, and occasionally take captives for slave labor. And they know the hegemony is here? Zoe asked. They must realize Earth is under your protection now. The Vkr'lak are well informed about hegemony movements, Zex Teal confirmed. Our presence here is not a secret. Then why would they come at all? Zoe pressed. You said it yourself. One raider against a battlecruiser is suicide. The Vkr'lak may be aggressive, but are they stupid? The question hung in the air for a moment, causing several of the hegemony officers to exchange looks. You believe there is some deception at work, Zex Teal said. It wasn't a question. I think if I were going to raid a protected system, I wouldn't announce my presence by flying straight in, Zoe replied. I'd try to disguise my approach or create a distraction. Zex Teal's crest shifted to the pale blue of calculation. Elaborate. Zoe moved closer to the holographic display, gesturing to the raider's trajectory. This approach is too direct, too obvious. It's practically screaming, look at me. What if that's the point? What if they want you to focus your attention on this ship while something else happens elsewhere? Our sensor coverage of the system is comprehensive, Vernas objected. We would detect any other vessels. Maybe, Zoe acknowledged. Or maybe they found a way to trick your sensors. Or maybe the real threat isn't another ship at all. Zex Teal studied her for a long moment, then turned to her officers. Reassign sensor resources. I want detailed scans of the raider vessel and complete coverage of all approach vectors to Earth, focusing on non-standard trajectories. Commander, one of the senior officers protested. This is a standard Vkr'lak probe. Protocol dictates. Protocol assumes predictable adversaries. Zex Teal cut him off. Lieutenant Harrison has reminded us that assumption can be dangerous. Execute my orders. The command center burst into activity as officers redistributed sensor assets and began more comprehensive scans. Zoe found herself in the unfamiliar position of being both an outsider and suddenly influential in an alien military operation. "Your perspective is valued, Lieutenant," Vkr'lak said quietly, moving to stand beside her. "What else would you consider in this situation?" Zoe thought carefully. "If I were planning an operation against a superior force, I'd try to use their strengths against them. The hegemony relies on advanced technology and established protocols. I'd look for ways to disrupt both. Such as electronic warfare, perhaps, sensor spoofing, or..." Zoe paused as a new thought struck her. What if the raider isn't the threat at all? What if it's just a delivery system? Vkr'lak's crest rippled with interest. "Explain." "Maybe the ship itself is just a shell. The real threat could be something it's carrying. A computer virus, some kind of infiltration system, or..." She was interrupted by an urgent call from one of the sensor stations. "Commander, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the Vkr'lak vessel. It appears to be launching something." The holographic display zoomed in on the raider, showing small objects being ejected from its hull, dozens of them, spreading out in different directions. "Weapon platforms?" someone suggested. "No," Vkr'lak reported, analyzing the data. "Too small. Each object is approximately the size of a personal transport pod." Realization dawned on Zoe. They're not attacking the station or the battlecruiser. They're going for Earth directly. "Explain," Vkr'lak demanded. "Those aren't weapons. They're transport pods for raiding parties," Zoe said, the pieces falling into place. "They're using the ship as a distraction while they send teams to hit multiple targets on Earth simultaneously. Small groups, probably aiming for quick smash-and-grab operations before you can respond." Vkr'lak's crest flared with alarm. "Verify," she ordered. Vkr'lak worked his console rapidly. "Trajectory analysis confirms. The objects are on course for various locations on Earth's surface. Estimated time to atmospheric entry, 17 minutes. "We can intercept them with the battlecruiser's weapons," another officer suggested. "Negative," Vkr'lak replied. "At that range, near Earth's atmosphere, there's too much risk of debris causing damage to the planet. We need a more precise approach." She turned to Zoe. "Lieutenant, if you were defending against such an attack, how would you proceed?" Zoe didn't hesitate. "I'd deploy rapid response teams to the projected landing sites. Use local forces when possible since they'll get there faster. And I'd try to hack or disable the transport pods before they land, if your technology can manage that." Vkr'lak made a quick decision. "Vkr'lak, coordinate with Earth's defense forces. Provide them with landing zone projections and all available data on Vkr'lak combat capabilities. Deploy our tactical teams in support roles." She turned to another officer. "Attempt signal disruption on the transport pods. If we cannot destroy them safely, perhaps we can divert them to unpopulated areas." As the command center erupted into coordinated activity, Zoe found herself pulled into the tactical planning. Despite her junior rank, the hegemony officers were deferring to her input on how to counter the unconventional attack, a surreal experience that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. "You anticipated this," Vkr'lak said to her during a brief lull in the activity. "How?" Zoe shrugged. "I just asked myself what I would do if I were facing an overwhelming force. You don't challenge strength head-on. You look for gaps, for vulnerabilities. The Vkr'lak did exactly what humans might have done in their position." "Their strategy resembles your tactical demonstrations," Vkr'lak observed. "Misdirection, unpredictability, asymmetric approach. The universe has a sense of humor, I guess," Zoe replied. "We spend weeks teaching your people to think like humans, and the first real threat uses the same playbook against us." Vkr'lak's crest shifted to a color Zoe hadn't seen before, a deep, vibrant azure. "Perhaps that is why the High Command was wise to accept my recommendation for partnership rather than assimilation. Your species understands this type of thinking inherently." Before Zoe could respond, Vkr'lak called out. "First pods entering Earth's atmosphere, tracking multiple targets across North America, Asia, and Europe." The next hour was controlled chaos as the combined human and hegemony forces scrambled to respond to the Vkr'lak raids. The alien raiders had indeed targeted multiple locations on Earth, mostly research facilities, military installations, and technology centers. But thanks to the early warning and coordinated response, many of the raids were thwarted before they could cause significant damage. In the command center, Zoe worked alongside the hegemony tactical team, adapting strategies on the fly as the situation evolved. When 3 pods landed near a research facility in Colorado, she suggested deploying a small force to engage the raiders. while using the facility's own security systems as a trap, a strategy that resulted in the capture of an entire Raksiri team without casualties on either side. "The main raider vessel is attempting to leave the system," reported one of the sensor officers. "Shall we pursue?" Zextel looked to Zoe. "Lieutenant, your assessment?" Zoe considered the situation. "They've committed to their operation. The teams on the ground are their priority now. I'd say let the ship go, but track it if possible. We might want to know where it reports back to." "Agreed," Zextel said. "Maintain sensor lock on the vessel, but do not intercept. Focus our resources on containing the ground situation." By the time the crisis was resolved, 17 Raksiri raiders had been captured. 5 had been killed in firefights with Earth's military forces, and the rest had managed to escape via emergency transport systems. The damage to Earth installations was minimal, and there had been no civilian casualties, a result that Zextel described as unprecedented for a Raksiri raid. In the aftermath, as the command center returned to normal operations, Zextel called Zoe aside. "Your tactical insights were invaluable today," the fleet commander said. "You saw a pattern that our standard protocols would have missed until it was too late." "Just applying the same principles I've been trying to teach your officers," Zoe replied. "Indeed." Zextel's crest had settled into a calm, deliberate blue. "And you have demonstrated their effectiveness in actual combat, not merely simulations. This will significantly strengthen the case for our partnership arrangement with Earth." Zoe nodded, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the long, tense day. "So what happens now?" "Now," Zextel said, "we formalize the military exchange program. Your defensive tactics clearly complement our technological capabilities. Together, they present a formidable combination, one that the Raksiri and others would be wise to avoid testing again." "So, we're partners?" Zoe asked, still finding the concept hard to believe. "It would appear so," Zextel confirmed. "The High Command has approved the preliminary arrangement, pending final diplomatic details. Earth will retain its sovereignty while gaining access to certain technologies, in exchange for tactical expertise and cooperation on mutual defense. All because I showed Ambassador Vkr'lak that humans don't always aim at the obvious target," Zoe mused. "Sometimes," Zextel said, with what might have been the hegemony equivalent of a smile. "The most important discoveries are made by accident. The hegemony has dominated this sector for millennia because of our technology and our discipline. But perhaps we have become too predictable, too rigid." "A little chaos can be healthy," Zoe suggested. "Indeed." Zextel made a gesture that Zoe had learned indicated formal recognition. "Lieutenant Harrison, the hegemony would like to offer you a permanent position as liaison and tactical advisor to our fleet. You would divide your time between Earth and our facilities, helping to develop what we are now calling integrated asymmetric response protocols." Zoe blinked in surprise. "That's quite an offer. I'd need to consult with my superiors." "Of course. But consider this. You have already changed the course of hegemony policy toward your planet. Imagine what else might be possible with continued cooperation." As Zoe left the command center, she found Ambassador Vkr'lak waiting in the corridor outside. "I understand congratulations are in order," he said. "Not only did you help thwart the Raksiri attack, but you've been offered a prestigious position." "Word travels fast," Zoe remarked. "The hegemony communication network is quite efficient," Vkr'lak replied. "Though I suspect human gossip travels nearly as quickly." Zoe laughed. "Probably faster, actually. We're pretty good at informal information sharing." "Another human trait worth studying," Vkr'lak said, falling into step beside her as they walked through the station's corridors. "You know, Lieutenant, when I first observed your demonstration at the firing range, I thought I was witnessing an amusing curiosity, a primitive species finding clever workarounds for their technological limitations. And now I understand I was witnessing something far more significant, a fundamentally different way of approaching problems." Vkr'lak's secondary eyelids blinked in what she now recognized as thoughtful consideration. "The hegemony has existed for 20,000 years, Lieutenant. In that time, we have encountered hundreds of species, assimilated 17, and cataloged countless approaches to technology, governance, and warfare. But none quite like humanity's. Your species doesn't just solve problems differently, you define them differently." Vkr'lak made a gesture she hadn't seen before, something like a salute. "It seems the universe still has surprises to offer, even for a civilization as old as ours." As they reached the human delegation's quarters, Vkr'lak paused. "Will you accept the position?" Zoe considered the question. 3 months ago, she had been a sniper on a dusty range in Nevada, annoyed at having to babysit alien diplomats. Now she was being offered a role that could shape relations between Earth and the most powerful known civilization in the galaxy. "You know," she said finally, "I think I might. Someone needs to keep reminding the hegemony that not everyone aims for the obvious target." "Indeed," Vkr'lak agreed. "And perhaps that is precisely what we need. Someone who sees beyond the target to possibilities we have not considered." As the ambassador departed, Zoe stood for a moment looking out a viewport at the blue-green sphere of Earth below. Humanity had just narrowly avoided becoming the 18th species assimilated by the hegemony, not through superior technology or firepower, but through unpredictability, through the very chaos and creativity that made humans, well, human. She couldn't help but smile at the irony. All those fancy alien weapons, all that advanced technology, and in the end, what had saved humanity was the simple fact that sometimes the best shot isn't the one aimed directly at the target. Sometimes the best shot is the one no one sees coming.